Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, this is Lindsay here with Design Manager Software today on our Pro Cloud question and answer webinar. I have our super expert Brad Martin who is ready to go through a really good list of questions that we had submitted to us ahead of time. And then any other questions that people think of along the way, please do type into us into the questions pane on the right hand side. I will be monitoring those and I will be shouting those out to Brad time permitting. So if we can get some of those towards the end, we will do our best to get as many as we possibly can. All right, so Brad is ready and we are going to start off with a walkthrough of adding time via the mobile app.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Brad here. Walk through time on the mobile app. That is a great question. I'm going to get a little fancy here. I have my mobile app on my iPhone, and I'm going to shadow that or screen share so we can all see it on my monitor as well. I'm going to start off and create a time entry, and then we'll let it accumulate a little bit so that we can see how it's going to go from the mobile app into Design Manager. So the first thing on the app itself, I'm going to go to record time, and I'm going to start our timer. Let's go ahead and put a project in. Oops. We'll do an activity. Looks like we're presenting. Perfect. And we're good to go. And as you can see along the bottom, the timer's going for me. I can pause it if desired. And then when I'm ready, I'll hit create entry. So let's go ahead and let this get some couple minutes behind it, and then we'll follow the process after that. So Lindsay, why don't you pop on the next question for me, and we'll continue.
Okay, so the next question that we have here submitted to us is, how should a sales category be set up to enter purchases for clients on behalf of the company?
Okay. There could be a lot of different ways to interpret that question, but anything involving sales categories, I always think that we should review because they are really critical to maintaining accurate accounting on both the revenue side and your cost of goods sold side. So let's go ahead. I'll give sort of an overview of the entire process. Sales categories can be entered and configured on your accounting tab, under your list and glossaries frame, and then we have your option for sales categories. Now, Design Manager Cloud comes with a preset of the most commonly used sales categories, but that list can be fully customizable to whatever your company's needs are. So don't feel like obligated to use all of ours, or you can add to them, or what have you. Now, what is the purpose of a sales category? Well, really, the sales category is used to classify the good or service that you're going to be providing to your client. And you can see examples here for accessories, furniture, even labor, lighting, etc. And upon that classification, you can then run analytics or reports to say, hey, what was my profitability on accessories this year? Or what was my total cost on furniture in the last quarter or for a specific project or what have you? Looking at furniture as an example, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. And the sales category itself has a series of sales or revenue accounts along with cost of goods sold accounts. So whenever we're going to assign an item to the furniture sales category in our example, I don't want to remember to use the 41,900 furniture revenue account when I'm invoicing the client, and I certainly don't want to remember to use the 51,900 furniture cost of goods sold account when I'm recording the bills from my vendors. As long as I consistently and accurately classify my item as furniture, Design Manager will handle all of the accounting for us. Now, taking that a step further, let's go over to File and Company Information and Settings. I'm going to go to our advanced button, which brings us to some of the higher level functionality at a company level. And I'm going to jump over to our general link. By default, the option for require sales category is going to be selected in your design manager. That's going to force all of the users to enter a sales category when entering in a specification such as an item. But it's also going to be used when you enter a catalog, an inventory item, even reimbursable expenses, etc. So that forces the user to use the sales category. Now, if that option is turned off for whatever reason, there's also a series of sales and cost of goods sold accounts at the company level. These are the defaults. So if an item does not have a sales category assigned to it, and let's be honest, best practices, you really should be using the sales categories, which is why we have that option configured by default. You would use the company-wide sales accounts and cost of goods sold accounts on this level. That's the generic ones, and it doesn't allow you for much flexibility or information when you're going to analyze your accounts come the end of the year, or like we're in the throes of right now. Now, a sales category most traditionally is going to be assigned on your project specifications. Let's just pop up a project here. Look at the item, and we can see the sales category is assigned right on the item window. The component window will then have the component type selection. If the sales category is classifying the good or service sort of from the item, from the client's perspective, the component type is doing the same from the vendor's perspective. And it's the combination of the selected component type and the sales category which will again ultimately determine which sales or revenue account is used when invoicing the client and what cost of goods sold account is used upon receiving and recording your bills from your vendors. And just as a final example, I'll go ahead and create a sales category, and you can see how easy it is. I don't yet have a sales category for reimbursable expenses, a very common scenario that I've come across in my experience. I have already taken the liberty of, under our accounting tab in our chart of accounts, I've made a pair of reimbursable revenue accounts and a reimbursable expense cost of goods sold accounts. Now I want to associate that with a sales category. And to do so is very easy. Go to our sales category glossary again. I'm going to click the add button. I'm going to use something creative for the code like REINB, and I'll just call this reimbursable expenses. Now, I can have Design Manager use those company defaults. Like if I always want freight to be set to a particular account, regardless if it's furniture, floor coverings, or whatever, I can just use the company default, and Design Manager will go to that company window as we just saw and use those accounts. But my reimbursable expenses, I want to track those solely in those new accounts that I've created. So I can configure each of my sales accounts to use the 49,600 and the cost of goods sold to use the 59,600 for each one. So regardless of whatever component type I select, I'm always going to be using the exact set of revenue and cost of goods sold accounts that I desire. And after much pasting, all done. So whenever I go to invoice the client for reimbursable travel or what have you, it'll go into my new reimbursable expense revenue account. And likewise, when I do record those bills, I'll be putting it into a reimbursable expense cost of goods sold account. And there we go, our brand new reimbursable expense sales category. And that is sales category in a nutshell.
Okay, That's awesome. All right, so we're still waiting for the time app to, get some more time on
Yeah,
there.
let's do another question, then we'll go back to the time app.
Okay, great. Using the expense page when you charge the expense back to a project and how you can connect it to an item.
Hmm. Well, that falls right into our discussion on reimbursable expenses, so that's a fantastic question in line here. So, uh, very common question, very common scenario, and very important for your overall business. Basically, whenever we're doing work or incurring a charge from a client, it becomes up to us to determine, well, should I bill the client for that to be reimbursed for that expense? And heck, should I even mark it up if desired? So Design Manager realizes how important of a concept that is and how critical it is to maintaining accurate profitability for your design firm. So we try to make the process as easy as possible. There are a few different methodologies that I have seen in my experience with reimbursable expenses. Traditionally, people are going to do it one of two ways. They're either going to create the reimbursable expense so that it makes a individual item in the project, which I can then invoice to the client, just like I would do traditionally with merchandise or any other service. I've seen other firms, however, aggregate those charges where they might say, hey, I'm going to take all of my reimbursable expenses for a given time frame, let's say a month or what have you, and they'll attach each of those individual bills to that singular item. So rather than having this big invoice with dozens or scores of different reimbursable expenses, which can get a little overwhelming to the client, they'll just see one lump sum. So I'll quickly go through both of those scenarios. Regardless of the method of choice to invoicing the client, the entry of the expense is always going to go through our accounting tab under our accounts payable frame and bills and invoices, sort of our one-stop shopping for all of our vendor payable entry. I'm going to click the add button. These are always going to be type expense, of course. Upon selecting the type, you can see that the window subtly reformats. Let's say I have some how about I was going to use a travel. Here's a great example. So I might not care of my specific mode of transportation. I could take an Uber, I could take a train, what have you. I don't want to have a vendor for each of those individual companies from which I use the travel service. I'm going to create a vendor on the fly, let's call it. I'm going to call it TRAV for travel expenditures, or whatever verbiage you want. I don't care about the address or anything along those lines. This is going to be a generic vendor I'm going to use to track all of my bills that I've used for any type of transportation. To make it even handier, I'm going to go to the defaults tab, and along the bottom, I have a default expense account, which I'm going to use my reimbursable cost of goods sold account that we just created. Click OK. I have my brand new vendor, and I'm going to use that. My invoice number could be, something that descriptive of what happened, Uber, and let's say a few days ago. Date would be the date that I actually used the Uber. Remember, in Design Manager, entering dates, just the month and the day. You don't need to input any slashes, dashes, or those types of things. And if it is in the current year, you can skip that as well. And as you saw, Design Manager will assume it is the current year. Transaction descriptions are optional, but I always recommend them when you're trying to research what you may have done weeks or even months prior. They come in quite handy. And now I'm going to click the Add button. Very conveniently, I'm already being associated with the account that I selected on my travel vendor that we just made. But this is not a non-project expense. This is a project-related or a reimbursable expense. So if we use the project related option, notice that the vendor invoice distribution window also reformats a bit. Rather than looking for a direct account, it's now looking for a sales category. Why? Ultimately, we're going to be creating an item in the project. So this could be our brand new reimbursable expense sales category. Let's say my Uber was, oh, I don't know, $22.50. And now I just enter in the project from which I'm going to be reimbursed from my client. Ship bottom remodel. Design manager is going to ask me if I want to update markup or those types of information. I generally say yes here. And I'm going to change. No, actually, remember, since our reimbursable expenses have our reimbursable sales account and reimbursable cost of goods sold account set to every one of our component types, the type actually doesn't matter too much in this case. I could choose to mark it up if desired. In fact, I'll leave it as such. So I'm crafting a price to the client of $29.25, which is our cost marked up 35%. This description is going to be what the client sees on the invoice. In other words, this will be the description that goes into the item that's going to get crafted for us. And then I can choose whether or not this is taxable, etc. Transportation on 1-7-2020 or what have you. Click OK. I now have my account distribution. Technically, I could add as many as I desire right now. I don't have to just add a single one. If I have multiple Ubers that I want to enter in a single expense, I could do so. Click OK and go ahead and post. And now, over in our project specifications, let's take a look. There is our brand new item from our travel expenditures ready to go ahead and invoice to the client. So in this method, I'd be making a new item in each and every project for each and every reimbursable expense. Provides tremendous amount of information to the client, tremendous transparency. But again, you might have longer invoices, whatever your firm and the client desires. Now I've also configured the ship bottom remodel to view the other method where I'm going to aggregate expenses. In this case, I've already created a reimbursable expense item. I have the verbiage that I want to appear on the invoice. I've even created a conceptual location of reimbursable expenses. So I know exactly where it's going to appear on the invoice. And I have it associated with professional services. But since we just made our new reimbursable expense sales category, I can change that as well. And now this is going to act as, let's call it a bucket item that I can use to add all of these various expenditures into. So in that method, again, we'd be back on our accounting bills and invoices, of course, that's where all of our vendor bills get entered. We're going to do add expense again. Let's use our travel expenditures vendor just for simplicity. Taxi 1-8-2020. Again, just 8. Transaction description, I just pasted. Back to our add button as indicated by the green plus sign. And remember, we want to use our project related option. Sales category, you're going to see momentarily that's not even necessary. Our taxi 3150 project was our ship bottom remodel. Now, prior, we used the new item option. In this case, we're going to use the existing item option. And I can select our reimbursable expenses item for January. That's going to be our bucket item. The description in this case really is for our information. This is going to be at the component level as we've already crafted the description we want on the item itself. We can can mark up if desired, as we did in our prior example. Click OK. And I could really, in this case, add as many as I'd like. Upon clicking OK to save the entry and posting, the difference here, back on our specifications for our ship bottom remodel, into our reimbursable expenses for January item, we can see I'm beginning to accumulate all of these. I have the design manager is going to use the description that I typed in on the reimbursable expense window, along with the fact of it was a miscellaneous cost, the invoice number, and even the transaction number for me, again, for all of my reference. So you can see I could have up to 999 of these expenses into a single item. The client's just going to see reimbursable expenses January 2020 and the total price. Yet I have all of that information behind me. In fact, upon invoicing, we can even use a report under accounts payable reports called our miscellaneous project expense listing, where I could print out a copy of all my expenses for a particular project, so that if the client ever did want some additional information on what was encapsulated in that single item, I could provide that as well. I could turn off the show actual cost, and all they're going to see is the price itself as such. And there we go. And we can see all of our expenses that we've recorded for this particular project. So Design Manager really can handle all of your reimbursable expenses in a whole variety of manners, depending on what you and your client really desire. Okay, so that handles the reimbursable expenses. Lindsay, I'm going to jump back over to our time entry and continue that, unless you have a pressing question to put in the middle there.
Somebody did ask about what if they didn't want to charge the client for that expense? Would you recommend doing like a zero price on there and pushing that through as an invoice with a zero price?
I do not. I don't like to do extra work. So the only reason that I would, in that example, let's get back. In that particular example, I would leave the expense as non-project. That's going to reflect as a company expense, ultimately reducing my overall net income. If so desired that I wanted to track the profitability on a per client basis, this gets a little trickier. You can do so, but what you would do is on the bottom, there is an option called bypass work in process. That will allow me to join the particular expense to the project, and it will not be, let's say, awaiting for me to invoice to the client. But use that option with great care. If it's a concept that sounds a little bit unusual to you or foreign, the idea of work in process, it's something that you should talk to your accountant with or our technical support staff as well. But that will allow me to associate the expense with a project and not need me to make that zero balance invoice.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Got it. Okay, so our time app, let's go back to our screen share, and there we go. Whoa, 22 minutes already. I'm going to go ahead and click the create entry option. Bing. Okay, and there we go. Now, I'm using the mobile app to monitor my time. My time is worth something. I want to track it. It has great value to both myself and to my clients. So the mobile app makes that feature extremely convenient. The next phase, upon making that time entry, it then goes into the whiteboard of Design Manager. For those of you unfamiliar with the whiteboard, that's also located on our project tab and our first option of the whiteboard. think of the whiteboard as our staging area for a whole variety of, let's call them entities. They could be pieces that I've captured, pictures that I've taken to be utilized in projects or inventory and other areas. But notice it can also receive my time. And there it is in the top left corner. It's dated today. It has one time entry for Ashley Brandon. How does it figure out that I am Ashley Brandon? Well, here's how. Under our company information and settings, on all of our users and securities, here is my demo or webinar account that I utilize, and I've associated an employee with that particular account. So as I'm adding my time entry in, it's associating it with the employee on that user setting. Now, be careful or take heed if you do share or split a cloud account with another individual or individuals at your company. You can only have one person or one employee associated with it, which is why we recommend to have individual accounts. So once it's in the whiteboard, I can then select the action button in the bottom right corner, and I have a few options for time entries. I can review and create. I could transfer to another user. Perhaps I am a junior designer and I want my senior designer to review my time, or the principal or what have you. I can use the transfer option to do so. Or if I made one incorrectly or duplicated or for whatever reason want to get rid of it, I can click the delete option. Most traditionally, I'm going to click the review and create time entries. So as the whiteboard is accumulating all of my time from my mobile app, I then click review and create. Design Manager alerts me, sending these time entries to the review window. Will remove them from the whiteboard, fantastic, and my mobile app, even better. Do you wish to continue? I do. This brings us to the third area, which is our time entry import window. We all know how important design time is to our industry and how invaluable it is to properly record and review all of our time, not just to ensure billing to the client, which of course is important, but even if we use fixed fees or don't bill on a per hour basis, having your time tracked gives you the ability to analyze all of that and to see, hey, is this job really profitable at what I've charged for the amount of hours that myself and my team are working. The time entry import doesn't just take entries from our whiteboard. I can also use the import feature, where I could use one of Design Manager's crafted timesheets that we have available intrinsically in the program, or even importing from other outside sources, just an Excel sheet or any application that can generate an Excel file or a variety of files, quite honestly, and bring those entries in. Once all of my hours are on my time entry import, again from the whiteboard or other sources, then I can again review with principal. I can review myself. I can delete entries. Perhaps I want to combine entries or those types of things just for sake of clarity to the client. I can even then export this list into another Excel sheet for future review. Again, a lot of functionality is tied into this time entry import, and our development team spent some amazing amount of time on it, and we find it to be extremely helpful and useful and feature packed. Once everything on my time entry import is to my liking, the final step is to record to projects. Design Manager warns me, hey, sure you're going to record all these entries? And there we go. It'll enumerate all the entries that have been imported successfully. I could have put some on hold, or I could have had others to be reviewed, etc. And now my time entry import is clear. Lastly, back on our specifications for our ship bottom remodel, there is my time for January, and there's our design presentation, which essentially is our discussion today. I'm using the format here where I'm joining all of my time entries into that single time bucket item. We saw how it works on the reimbursable expenses. I can do the same for design services. So my client's going to see a single item for all of my design time, and yet at the invoice level, I can provide additional detail, which enumerates and lists all of the individual entries themselves just for the client's review. So that's how the process flows from the time app of the app. The mobile app allows us to record our time entries. Easy, we're on the go, very simple. From there, they automatically import into my associated Design Manager cloud account. From there, I can then send them off to our time import, which is about the last staging area for final review with myself and any other individuals in the company, and then I can record the projects. And now I'm ready to invoice the client. So that's the overall flow through Design Manager. Very simple, ease of use, lots of areas for review, analytics, all of those types of things. Again, we're really trying to make that entire process as fast and as easy as possible for you. Okay, Lindsay, time app all the way through. What's next?
Okay, I think we had something about the whiteboard and adding a card as an item or a component. Maybe just talking about the whiteboard a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, we already saw how the whiteboard can handle our time entries, and I've got lots of different entries on here that I've been accumulating over time. The whiteboard can be used very commonly in conjunction with the product clipper, where you can have your Google Chrome add-in from Design Manager and simply easily grab information from different websites, and it crafts these whiteboard cards for us. The question here is, and we've seen actually through our client experience team, that people are somewhat get confused on, all right, I have all this stuff on the whiteboard, what can I do with it? You could do a lot. So from each of our captured cards, looking at our action option in the bottom right, we can do a variety of different tasks. For example, I could take our Spanish bench, click my action button, and notice on my share and create options for a captured picture or item, I have a lot more entries than I do just for a time. I could create an item. I could create as a component. I can make an inventory item, catalog. I could duplicate the card, on and on and on and on. The vast majority of times we see people creating them as an item. This is going to take the image that I've crafted on my whiteboard and bring it over to a project. Before I do so, notice there's an edit button as indicated by the pencil icon in the top right of the card, where all the information that I captured originally is going to be displayed for me. So in this case, if I wanted to send this to a project, I could put in the project in question. Let's use somebody else. How about Long Beach Island home? Fantastic. I could even put a location if desired. Outdoor patio, probably not a good idea, but that's all right. And now, if I use the action option, I could say create item. Oops. Hey, Design Manager's warning me that I need to put a sales category in, and I will do so. Let's put in furniture in this case. And I can create an item. Design Manager, of course, is going to warn me I can cancel if desired. The behind the scene magic happens. The item drops off of the whiteboard itself. And Design Manager now is indicating, hey, I've made a new item into that project. Do you wish to go see it? Sure, why not? By clicking yes. And here is our item within that project. All of our vendor information, cost and pricing information is calculating for us. There's the location we put in, the sales category was enforced, the picture is going to come, everything done for us. So now I'm ready to go. I can make my purchase order, those types of things from here, and progress down the design cycle. By far the most common scenario with the whiteboard, but by no means the only scenario. I can also add cards as components to an item. let's observe. So back on our project specifications, let's go to that Long Beach Island, home again. And what's becoming a bit of a common theme is I've created an artwork item that's going to represent the art throughout the entire home itself. And rather than individually putting in all of my various pieces of art and invoicing to the client, I'm going to aggregate that under a single item. So I'm going to add certain cards as a component to our item 24 artwork. So I have a few pieces of some beach-esque art that I'm going to add as components. I go back to my action. Rather than create item, in this case, we're going to create as a component. Upon clicking that option, Design Manager is going to say, well, what item would you like to do? Of course, I had to assign a project into the card itself. We will use our artwork item and choose. Design Manager is going to do hard work for us. It takes that card off of our whiteboard and has now added it to our item. It's going to ask me if I wish to see it. Let's add a few more before we do that. So I'll click no, and we'll put the other pieces in as well. Add the item, grab our artwork. Very easy. So now I've taken 3 individual cards, and rather than creating items in the project, I've included them on a single item. And now we can go ahead and click yes and take a look, and we'll see our artwork item, and there are all of the components that we just added in. And we can even see their individual pictures, etc. There we go. So that's 2 main functions of the whiteboard: creating items for proposing and invoicing, or adding particular cards or as components. Another option, which is probably the 3rd most common, is taking one of these and adding them to inventory. I could be at market or what have you, or on a shopping trip in some locale, and I'm taking pictures of all the products that I'm buying. Guess what? Right from the mobile app, it's now taking those pictures and putting them onto our whiteboard. From there, I could perhaps take this table, and I'm not going to create an item. I have not yet decided what project this item should be is designed for. I'm not going to create it as a component, but I can create it as an inventory item. What Design Manager will do, it's going to take the catalog number in this case and use it as the stock number, just as a default for you. But you could, of course, change that if you have a stock number system that you've already implemented. Description, all of the information comes over for us: the cost, sell price, vendor, etc. Picture as well. Click OK, and now drops off of our whiteboard as we're accustomed to. But rather than going into a project, now on our inventory, we can see our brand new item listed there. So the whiteboard is sort of that staging area for all types of activities. Any of the merchandise that you've accumulated is going to go there, from the iPhone, from your mobile app, from the product clipper, time entries, etc. And then you just choose which direction you want those particular pieces to go to in the future. And that's sort of whiteboard in a quick nutshell.
Okay, thanks, Brad. We need to keep this moving. We're getting a lot of questions here. One that always seems to come up is groups versus items, and when do I use groups and why don't I already use groups? I guess everything having to do with what is a group and what is an item, etc.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Great fundamental question there. In brief, Design Manager's overall philosophy upon of our specifications and project management in general is the concept of being able to purchase individual goods and services from a vendor or a variety of vendors, and yet aggregate those as a single item to present to the client. I often use the idea of a custom sofa. The client just wants to see custom sofa on the proposal, $15,000, but we all know I need to get the frame, the fabric, the inner lining, lining, trim, blah, 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 all from a variety of different vendors. That relationship in Design Manager is the item to component relationship. As we just saw, we have a single item for artwork, yet we have a variety of components that are behind that item. The client's going to see artwork on the proposal and invoice and a total price versus seeing each of the individual components themselves. Now, we always want Design Manager to be able to be flexible to whatever sort of business model you have or a particular client's needs if a certain client is different than your other ones. So we've come up with it. People have asked us in the past, well, I want to see components on the invoice or proposal. For a variety of reasons, that's not really designed, and we've determined over in our experience that people may think they actually want to see components on the invoice, but really you want to see a singular price of individual items. To accomplish that, we've used the idea of a group. So a group is an association of items that's going to be arranged and subtotaled on your documents, like your proposal and invoice to the client. So what does all of that mean? Let's take a peek. So I have an item. I've crafted two examples in our Tesla's Lakewood home, where I have a single item for our custom pillow. This is our item at 130, which is fine. I could have as many pieces to that item as I may need, fabric, etc. Certain design firms and certain clients of design firms, that's fine. I want to see the total amount. But others would like, again, a little bit more transparency. So I deconstructed that custom pillow into its sort of subsequent pieces, the fabric, the labor, materials. But I've associated a group with them. So now I can see what the fabric cost and my price to the client, and the same with the labor, materials, etc. Let's quickly make a proposal that shows the difference between the two. Proposal window, we'll put in our project. We'll click add. Let's go down to our master bedroom. Here is our singular custom pillow for the entire 130 that we're charging the client. In the group scenario, I've made a group of custom pillow that has all of those pieces. So we'll select all three, again, $130. We'll click OK. I have my modern format, which is my preferred. The first, we can see our custom pillow, 130. But then we have our custom pillow group title, and I have the fabric, I have the labor, and I have the materials, all of which are individually shown to the client, and a group total as well. And of course, I'd have my location totals, subtotals, etc. So the group gives you the ability to have individual items, and even those items could quite honestly have multiple components themselves, yet present a total for that larger concept on your proposal and invoice to the client. So again, granting you the freedom of individualizing or no pun intended, itemizing those pieces, and yet still presenting the client a total. So they can say, hey, the custom sofa cost me $15,000, and here's where all of those expenditures were. And if that's not to your liking, you do not have to use groups. If you're comfortable with the way Design Manager works inherently, you can even selectively turn the groups off to avoid confusion, where under company information and settings, back to our familiar advanced, And on our general tab, we have this item groups option. If you deselect that, you won't see those areas of entry throughout the system any longer. So groups, another layer of sophistication in the way you're crafting your specifications. What do we have next, Lindsay?
We actually have a few questions. The first one, the spec search. I think like what's the best use for it, or maybe there's other uses for it that they don't know about.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Another great question. The specification search, really powerful tool, underutilized. This is sort of your black belt level of design manager expertise. In the Pro Cloud, to track that window down, you go to your specifications and you click the spec search button along the bottom toolbar. And that brings us to that specification search window. Now, the philosophy behind the window was really twofold from our development side. One was the ability to quickly locate particular specifications throughout Design Manager based upon whatever information you recall. You can look at our listing of criteria, which is quite lengthy, where you could put in what project was it associated with, it, clients, and then more informative information about the items and components themselves. What status am I looking for? I could even look at the item description, find everything that has the word sofa. And just like that, any item that has the word sofa anywhere in it, Design Manager is automatically going to return for me. So we used it to quickly find specifications that you had entered into the past. And from there, of course, you could conveniently use the Go To button, which brings it to that particular project. And I could even then go to my tree view, copy, and paste into another item as well. One of the main concepts behind the specification search. The other was an ability to almost use it like a query tool, where I could say to myself, I want to see all of the specifications that are, I don't know, how about we use sales category of lighting. Oops. Lighting, great. And light. And if I click the Find button, I can see every single specification that has a sales category of light. Okay, great. And from our from all the items and specifications that were returned, I have a vast array of information that I can view. All of the qualitative information, such as the descriptions, the types, vendors, etc. A lot of the order tracking information, what proposal was it on, client invoice, purchase order numbers, on, and finally a whole array of profitability information. What was my total cost on the component, total cost on the item, what's my item markup percentage, gross profit percentage, etc. I could even get more creative. I could say, show me all of the items of lighting, and if we recall our logical and, ors, and nots, I can get very sophisticated in the information I'm trying to look for. I could say sales categories of lighting, and how about invoiced last year? So I'm going to use 1 I do have to put the 19 in this case, to 12/31/19. Bam. So now I get a much smaller listing. Everything has the lighting sales category. And if we look at the client invoice date to the right here, everything that was invoiced within that particular year. And from here, I could go ahead, I could print out a copy of this where I see the items and components. And with a lot of the information of the order tracking and status information, and I could even print out a profitability version as well, almost like the profit analysis report, quite honestly, or I can then do some further analytics or just have this information handily accessible for me, cost, price, actual estimate, etc. And then further, if I want to do some real deep dive into the analytics, I could export the listing right into Excel, where then I have all of those columns listed, and I could, of course, scale down and get to the information that I desire, and review all of my tax information, review all of my profitability, etc. And I can even click on a link to the picture as well. So the specification search can really be used as a query tool and a profitability and analytic tool. Finally, what we've noticed, quite honestly, from experience in the field with our various clients and various design teams, is that the specification search can be used as a general project management tool. What do I mean by that? Well, certainly I can go to my specification window and look at my various projects and do all of the information that I need. Now, I'm just seeing the item information here. I'm not seeing any cost or pricing information. And quite honestly, I may be working on 3, 4 projects simultaneously, and I need to see a grander picture. Well, the specification search can be used to see multiple projects simultaneously. So I could say, let me see projects. I'll do the Long Beach Island remodel, or projects, and we'll go back to our Lakewood home. And now if we view the results, I'm seeing all of my Brennan project specifications and all of my Tesla ones as well. And I may want to review everything sort of on a global basis. I could, I don't know, sort by vendor and see all the vendors that I have not yet entered. If I want to do so, piece of cake. Right from here, I can edit either the item or the component itself. And I can go ahead and put in the vendor from here, just like that. So I have access to all of my specifications, or I could sort subtotal, all of those types of things, review information across multiple projects. So as the design process progresses deeper into the project itself, this kind of becomes an overall tool that allows me to work on multiple projects rather than just using my specification window in the traditional manner. So lots of hidden features and functionality encapsulated in that specification search.
All right. We probably don't have too much more time here, but we do have a few questions. I think the first one is, what is the best way to void uncashed check from a prior accounting year without impacting financials from that prior year?
An uncashed check. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Piece of cake. Whenever you go to void a check, we'll go to our checkbook. Let's go find someone. Let's say, great, so this check from Kravit was not yet cleared. Perhaps it never was cashed in our example. When you go to void a check, you're always provided with the ability to determine the fiscal month of which you want the void to be shown. So if I want to maintain the integrity of my 2018-2019 financials, I would void this check into the current fiscal year. So the check still remains way back in August of 19, but it's being taken out of my financials. In other words, it's going to be increasing accounts payable and increasing cash as of January 2020. The follow-up question to this is going to be, all right, well, I've cashed that check, fine. But now I've also reopened that payable, and there it is. How do I get rid of that? Well, in that case, let's use this one as an example. When you go, let's use our Go To button, which jumps me from my payments and checks right to my vendor deposit invoices, operating expense existing tab, I can void the payable itself, but I do not have the ability to set a fiscal month on the void of the payable. that would void back in 8 of 19. So in that case, I want to enter an offsetting entry. And here's how to do so. This was originally a deposit on CAP 04. I would put a deposit on the original purchase order. How much was that, guys? 600. I would put in today's date, offset old deposit as my transaction description so I can recall what I was doing. This is not going to be 525. This is going to be minus 600. Click OK. I'm being warned that it was entered. Great, I know it was. I'm going to hit OK. And I'll post this guy into the current fiscal period. Now back on our payments and checks, which automatically updates for us, I have my original entry and my offsetting entry into the current fiscal period. So I'm backing out all of the accounting information of the original entry, but I'm doing so in the current fiscal period or the period of my choice. To get rid of these guys, I select them both or tag, and I click the offset. As we are in early January, these type of cleanups are going to be very common right now. So I took that question to its next logical step, but a very good one, Lindsay.
Thank you. Yes, we do get that one quite a bit. I think this might be the last one that we can fit in here, but any of the others, I'll make sure to shoot over to our support team and somebody can write back to you some answers. Okay, so I have a duplicate expense refund showing up on a report, but in deposits, it is only there once. How do I get rid of the extra one?
Hit me with that again, please.
Yeah, a duplicate expense refund showing up on a report, but in the deposits, it's only showing up there once. How do I get rid of the extra one?
Unfortunately, I would need a little bit more information on that. Just have the design manager user email support at designmanager.com. Just put in the amount, the transactions in question, if known, or the project vendor, that kind, as much information as they have, and they could easily track it down. That sounds like a specific thing that's sort of very individualized. Yep. Okay,
and if you send anything to support, all the examples, you can, like if you have the report or anything, feel free to attach that, and we can definitely dig into that one.
Absolutely. And on that note, Lindsay, any support designmanager.com. If you have specific questions like that, always, as much information as you have, the amount, the vendor, the project, the item, the proposal number, check number, blah, 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 etc. Because our team they're crack scientists back there. With a couple pieces of information, they can tell you exactly what to do, and they'll get back to you with the response much, much faster.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we pretty much touched on everything. I will definitely, do another one in the future. I think we have them actually scheduled a couple more times throughout the year. So,
fantastic.
Thank you, Brad, for your time.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks for everyone for joining today. Really, really good questions, team.